Well, we've done a lot already, and so I'll make you a deal. If you stay for lunch, we'll make this short. Does that work? Good? We've done a lot of good stuff today. We celebrate the wonderful work that many of you do, that we do as a church body for one another, and in teaching and in serving and caring for each other. We've been together in baptism, being witnesses to and encouragers of Lance and his relationship with Christ as he goes forward. And we have a chance to continue this as we eat lunch together, as we talk together about worship. But for a moment I want to talk about Jesus and about what he has a tendency to do. As we've been talking about for weeks now, calling this the bad habits of Jesus. Jesus has a tendency to do some things that most people wouldn't do. And I think today, probably more than most, Jesus does something that we Christians even kind of have some trouble with. And it's that Jesus hung out with bad people. You've heard it said by a parent or a teacher probably in your lifetime, be careful who you choose as your friends. I'm the generation, and maybe it was before us, but I certainly remember my generation hearing all about peer pressure all the time. Be careful who you make your friends, because you are going to be pressured into doing either good things or negative things. And so we talked about it all the time. We get lectures about that, about surrounding ourselves with the right people. You've probably heard it said about somebody, usually young people, who got in with the wrong crowd, because who we surround ourselves with makes a difference. So even in the church, as Christians, we say, surround yourselves with other Christians, with people that are going to encourage you and be a good influence on you. And yet, Jesus was terrible at this. I mean, yeah, he surrounded himself with people that were his followers, true, but he picked some really interesting people for that. And a lot of his ministry, a lot of his time was spent with those that would fall into the wrong crowd. He called a tax collector to be one of his 12 disciples. Speaking of tax collectors, when Zacchaeus was looking for him, who we know cheated people out of all sorts of money, Jesus came directly to him and said, hey, we're going to your house for dinner. Invited himself right over. He touched lepers when he wasn't supposed to do that. He was with drunk people so much that everyone else, the religious people, called him a drunk. When I think about Jesus and his continual time with the wrong people, it makes me think about my childhood. It makes me think about those times where I've kind of had this opportunity to be with the right people or the wrong people, and sometimes even to be the right people or the wrong people, according to others. When I was in 7th grade, all of our elementary schools merged together into one junior high school. So in 7th grade, all those kids from your elementary school went together with all the others from the other schools, and so you kind of had this opportunity to make all new friends among the ones that you knew. And I met this guy named Aaron. And Aaron and I kind of got to become friends. And I remember one day he came to me and he said, I'm having a birthday party, and I want to have you come to the birthday party. But I haven't asked my mom yet, so let me talk to my mom, and then I will come back and let you know when it is. So he goes home, he comes back the next day to school, and he says, I can't have you come to my birthday party. Why can't I come to your birthday party? He said, I talked to my mom. My mom says pastors' kids are the worst. And so I'm not allowed to be friends with you. Now, unfortunately, that's sometimes true. We have a tendency to go one way or the other, right? We're either like goody two-shoes or horribly rebellious. But I don't think that's definitely true. We're somewhere in the middle oftentimes. But his mom was sure I was the wrong crowd to hang out with because I was a pastor's kid, and I'm surely going to get him into trouble. Thankfully, she eventually gave in, and we became very close. Then I think about in 11th grade, my junior year of high school, we moved before that to Overland Park from Iowa, and I went to Blue Valley North High School for a semester. And I went there and I didn't know anybody. I didn't have expensive enough clothes, and I drove a 68 Volkswagen Bug, so I was not exactly in my element at that high school. All the kids there were driving Mustangs and Camaros and BMWs, and I drove a Bug. I have a full-page picture of me and my Bug in the yearbook because it was the only vintage car. And all the guys that were my friends in that school said that just means piece of junk. They just wanted to be nice. So I'm going to the school for about a few weeks, and I haven't really made any friends. I just kind of do my own thing until finally one kid says, "Hey, who do you hang out with outside of school?" And I'm like, "Nobody." And he's like, "Come hang out with us." Now, the bad thing was, though these were great, nice, kind, and welcoming guys, they smoked, they drank at parties, they did worse. And that was the group that I was invited to. And I remember my parents and I were close. I wasn't interested in doing any of that stuff. That just was never a temptation for me. So I was the driver and the guy to take them to Krispy Kreme after the party. And my mom hated it and was always afraid, not that I was going to necessarily do what they were doing, but that I would get in trouble for being with them in those times. But they were the only ones that befriended me in this new and terrifying place that I was. So what do we do when Jesus is spending his time with people that are unsavory, and we live on this wisdom of surrounding ourselves with the good? Let's look at what Jesus does in one instance. We could go into a ton of them, but we're going to do one. John 4, starting in verse 1. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although, in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. In fact, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." Jesus encounters this woman, has an odd conversation. But what I love about it is he comes and he sits down at this well. The Samaritan woman comes to him, and for very basic background, they don't associate. They're mixed race. They don't follow exactly the Judaic law. They don't do things the way that the Jews think they should. So they are less than us. We are better than them, according to the way the Jews thought of the Samaritans. Not only that, but Jesus, a single guy, is speaking to a woman apart from her husband. She comes to it, and he doesn't say, hey, do you know I'm the Messiah? Do you know I could do all this stuff for you? His first question to her is, woman, would you give me a drink? He connects to this woman in a way that he shouldn't. And probably since the disciples aren't there, we don't have to see the backlash that would have come had they been around. Jesus reaches out to her through this conversation. He shares with her who he really is and who she really is. It's important to note that as he talks about her marriages and her life, he isn't calling her out in sin necessarily, because she doesn't really have any control over how many husbands and divorces she's had. Only the man has the power to divorce. What this means is it is likely that she's unable to have children, and so when you aren't able to have children in that culture, you are discarded because you serve no purpose for the husband. So here she is, broken, hurting, wounded. She's experienced this difficult life. Jesus comes and sits with her and begins a conversation with her. She is not who he should have been talking with. So I want you to just put yourself in the place of both of them today. Jesus and the woman. Because I think we fall into both places sometimes. First, put yourself in the place of this woman. Though we are a mess, though our life is broken, though we have sin in our lives, we have hurt in our lives, we have wounds that have happened to us, Jesus still chooses us. He still comes and wants to be with us. He still comes and wants to know us. I mean, think about how that feels. If you've ever walked back into a high school cafeteria after you've gotten out of high school, all those feelings come right back in, right? As I used to work with baccalaureate in Iowa, I would go and have meetings with the students before school, and I'd walk in. First of all, I would make very sure that I was happy with what I was wearing that day and wasn't wearing something they were going to make fun of me about. And then I'd show up at the school, and I'd walk in, and everybody's hanging out in the cafeteria before school starts, and it's like stepping back into that moment at a new school where nobody knew me, and I felt like the spotlights were on. We all feel that outcast feeling sometimes, just like this woman was treated by the Jews. We've been hurt. Jesus doesn't stay away from us, though we're outcasts. And he doesn't use the worst of our lives to define us. But here's the other side of that. Put yourself in the place of Jesus, not because we're Jesus, but because we also have opportunities to reach out to those unsavory characters, those non-churchy people, those ones that we are warned about, just as Jesus had. We have the opportunities to love the unlovable. My Tuesday morning Bible study, we're going through the book of Galatians, and we came upon one of my favorite stories, which is where Paul calls out Peter. Two apostles, two important men of God. And the problem is, Peter has been open to the Gentiles, the non-Jews who have chosen to follow Jesus. So he's been eating lunch with them, he's been hanging out with them. It's all been fine. Problem is, what Paul saw what happened, and when Peter was eating with the Gentiles, the Jews came in, and what did Peter do? He split and went and sat with the Jews. As soon as he saw the rest of his people coming, he was out, and he was going to go sit with them. And Paul comes in and goes, "Hypocrite! You say the Gentiles are okay. You say that Jesus' blood covers all of us, that the gospel is about what Jesus has done, and yet as soon as the Jews come around, you leave the Gentiles and go with them. I love that because it reminds us that all of us need to get called out every once in a while. Because none of us get it all the way. But also it reminds us that we have a call to go sit with the Gentiles, to go have a conversation with the Samaritan woman, to go hang out with the drunks, to go and be around the unsavories. And in the church, so often we surround ourselves with so many other Christians that when we're called and when somebody challenges us to go and share the gospel, we think about who we can do that with, and we don't even know anybody. Have you ever done that? Who could I share the gospel with? I have no non-Christian friends. I want to challenge you today. Jesus hung out with people that he wasn't supposed to, and he didn't care what anybody thought of him. He hung out with those he wasn't supposed to. He loved them. He gave his time with them. And we are called to do the same. We are so grateful that God has done that for us, as unsavory as we are. We, in turn, need to do it for others. My challenge this week, if you don't know anybody that doesn't already live this kind of life, then you need to meet some people. You need to go and make some new friends so that you can have the kind of influence that Jesus had, that he calls us to have. Let's pray.